And we are recording. Welcome everybody to week 6 of COM 100. Dr. Walton here. Hello, hello. We have Rena in the classroom with us, and I think I see a handful of people in the or attempting to get into the lobby. So I will keep an eye out for those of you that are waiting to pop in. But let's go ahead and jump into week 6. So on our agenda for tonight, let's talk a little bit about week 5. In week 5, you folks did your midterm. Now, I send out a message for you at the end of the week. Where we were at the end of the week as a class was in a really good spot. We had a handful of people who had jumped into the midterm and had been doing well since then. I'm still seeing a lot of really good submissions. There were a handful of folks who missed the midterm entirely, and a handful of folks who scored a little bit lower than what I'm looking for our class. So I wanted to extend an offer to anybody not thrilled with their midterm grade. If you are interested in remediating your score, meaning working on the pieces perhaps you didn't do so well on and bringing that score up, all you need to do is reach out to me, send me a message in the course, and I will be happy to go through some of those things and get you a few more points. If you missed the midterm entirely and you are in that boat, please reach out to discuss an extension. We'll see what we can do about getting you access. Mostly, like I've said before, I want everybody to feel comfortable and confident in their grade in this class. So I'm not terribly worried about offering grace when I can, right? So knowing that we are now into the second half of the class, I really want everybody to feel mostly at ease with the first half of the material so that we can move forward. And that midterm exam is a prime indicator of who's feeling what in the class. So the offer is on the table. Please feel free to reach out if you'd like to take me up on it. Other than that, a couple of things with grades. The week 5 discussion was really wonky. It was not there, then it was there, then nobody could see it anyway. Nightmare. Everybody should have been given full credit for the week 5 discussion because of those technical issues. Let me know if your grade book does not reflect that. If it does not, I will fix it for you. So besides that, everything else should have a grade at this point, unless it's late, and then it'll get turned around here shortly. I'd like you to take a look at where you're sitting in class overall. And if you're not happy with your grade, but you've done all the work, right? That's the time for you to reach out to me and say, Dr. Walton, I'm not happy with my grade, but I've done all the work and I'm interested in pulling it up. So that puts it on me then to help you make a plan to do that. But I've come to a place as a teacher now where I want you to succeed, but I don't want it more than you want it, if that makes sense. I'm not going to track you down and like make you an elaborate plan and then hound you to complete the plan. You folks are all adults. That's part of college, right? So I'm going to put some ownership onto you. The opportunity is there for you to improve if you want to, but I need to give you ownership of that. So that's kind of the spiel for week 5. So let's look forward to week 6. So this week we are going to be talking about effective meetings. As far as content goes, this week should be a little bit lighter. I'm hoping that coming right off that midterm exam, we're not going to be covering anything that's too hectic or complex for you folks to understand. And I'm also hoping that you are coming from a background of some experience with things like ineffective meetings so that you can relate this to your personal experience. So we'll cover the chapter, and then of course, as always, I will hang out for a little Q&A if anybody has anything. All right, so effective meetings. Let's do this. Oh, before I jump into the slides, I want to make sure you understand what the goal is for this session. I find it helpful to talk about the goals right up front, the things I want you to take away. So for this week, the things I want you to focus on are understanding that there are different types of meetings. They all have different goals and different purposes. I want you to understand how to effectively hold meetings in a variety of formats, online, in person, things like that. I want you to understand the goals and purpose for things like an agenda or notes. I want to talk to you about setting tone for a meeting, and then some sort of businessy procedural things. We're going to talk about parliamentary procedure, how to manage and encourage participation in meetings, things like that, and then how you close it down and follow it up. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my camera and let's jump in. So types of meetings. There are so many different types of meetings. A lot of folks think that a meeting is a meeting, right? We get together, we do a thing, and that's what it is. But not necessarily. It's important for you to understand the type of meeting you're going into, because that will impact, you know, your goals and what you're going to try to get out of it and how you should proceed with engaging with the meeting. So let's talk about the 4 types of meetings we're looking at specifically for this class. So the first one is called an information sharing meeting. This is something like a lecture, what we're doing here. Any sort of presentation, like if you go to see a conference speaker, that kind of thing, that's the same style, information sharing. The goal of a meeting like that is very straightforward. It's for me as the speaker to give you new information. We see them in business, you know, if I'm enacting a new policy. We see it in, of course, academics if I'm teaching a new concept. And when you go to an information sharing meeting, you'll see there are a lot of tools that are involved. I always have a PowerPoint for an information sharing meeting. And there's a really, really valuable reason behind that. We're going to talk pretty heavily about presentation aids in a future week, but I'll just sort of get into it as a high level right now. When you are sharing information, especially complex information, you have to give your audience more than one way to absorb it, right? We've talked about multi-channeled messages, and that's a lot of the goal of a presentation aid, is giving your audience an additional way to absorb your information. So information sharing meetings are generally pretty heavy on presentation aids, okay? Now, an information sharing meeting, it can take a few different forms. I'm trying to think of some really good examples for you because, you know, not everybody's been to a conference or, you know, has a high level blue collar, white collar, cubicle type job. So there's a lot of different styles of information sharing meetings out there. One that your textbook talks about is things like end of shift for like a police officer or maybe a nurse. They do like a handoff, right? Or a medical handoff. That's the same idea, information sharing. Okay. So the next type of meeting that we're going to talk about is a problem-solving meeting. And problem-solving and decision-making meetings really go hand in hand for me. These are probably the vast majority of the meetings you'll go to once you're kind of in the professional space. A lot of small decisions get made in high-level meetings. A lot of big decisions get attacked in other levels of meetings. I've seen meetings be formed just to tackle one specific idea or problem. Problem solving and decision making meetings are kind of the bread and butter of the business world. They can get really, really complex though. Okay, sometimes your goal is to get in and figure out what the problem is. Sometimes you are having a meeting because you know what the problem is and you need to have a plan or a policy or an idea to fix it or to work around it, right? To look at possible solutions. Then once you have the problem figured out, you have to go into your decision making process. You have to look at all the options. You have to brainstorm and get into a couple probably hopefully not too aggressive arguments trying to make a good decision. But all of that is designed with the goal of rectifying the problem you're there for, right? So problem solving is your first kind of half of the piece, and then you have to make the decision. Now, the last style of meeting that we're going to talk about today is something they call a ritual activity. I mean, that's a very clinical way for me to describe it. Ritual activities are kind of like a social function, right? So we're getting together to bond, to do team building, to strengthen relationships, maybe culture, things like that. Those are all ritual activities, okay? Rena says weekly staff meetings in the medical profession, medical imaging, yes, absolutely, very common for information sharing and problem solving. Perfect. So in your experience, Rena, you've got kind of a combo pack of info sharing and problem solving going on. That's a good combo. A lot of the times I'll see that in academics too. It's like, here's kind of a debrief on a couple of students we're worried about. What are we going to do about them? And we sort of brainstorm problems, and that leads to decision making. So yeah, absolutely. Very good point. These types of meetings don't exist in a silo or in a bubble, right? They can bleed into each other and be multi-purpose. So ritual activities may be the one thing that doesn't kind of blend, right? So when we get together at the beginning of the week and we have like a kickoff and like a all hands hoorah so we can have a positive week, or maybe a faculty meeting where we spend the first few minutes appreciating people, which is kind of common these days for me. Those are all ritual activities where we're really focused more on the social function than on getting actual business done, okay? So these are the 4 types of meetings I want you to be aware of. Now, the other thing for you to consider as you're going through the chapter this week is the setting for your meetings, okay? There are a lot of different types, and because of the world that we are in these days, there's a huge shift in how we do meetings now. Technology, it's a big piece of it. I am in like 9 of these meetings, these Zoom calls, like a day. It can be exhausting. But I think that virtual meetings have their place, right? It's helpful to be able to see everybody, to get them all on the screen, to be able to meet in real time rather than trying to communicate with several people across different time zones. There are drawbacks, of course, but there are a lot of benefits. So let's talk benefits first. Inexpensive right off the bat. This is one of the cheapest ways for everybody to get together. I love this screenshot because it's got some of my favorite Avengers in it, of course. And if we were really talking to the Avengers here, right? We've got Thor, who's from Asgard. We've got T'Challa from Wakanda. The airfare to get everybody in one room would be bonkers expensive. So just logistically, getting everybody on a Zoom call is pretty beneficial there. The second thing for you to think about is that everything that is said in a Zoom meeting or a virtual meeting, including handouts and notes and agendas, all of that stuff can be recorded and stored. This is my favorite because when we come down to things like miscommunications and I have to say, no, I have the recording, right? That's very, very helpful. It also helps if you say miss a meeting and need to catch up on it later. Beautiful opportunity for you to stay in the loop using technology, right? One of the things the textbook talks about that I didn't even think about as a benefit, but totally made me rethink how I'm perceiving it, is your textbook talks a little bit about how in a Zoom or a virtual meeting, you can be patched in for only the piece you need. So imagine being scheduled for an hour-long meeting, but really I only need to be there for like 5 minutes to tell my piece. Well, if I was in a real life meeting, I would have to sit through the entire thing until it was my turn. But on a Zoom meeting, you can, patch me in. I'll say my piece, I'll answer my questions, and I can get back to my day. Really, really good for productivity. Okay. Um, Disadvantages, sure. All right. They exist. It's a thing. We see people logging in from all sorts of places, and there are about 1 bajillion examples I could give you. I could have gotten some really funny screenshots and some videos of people logging in from weird places. I've seen just personally some really bizarre choices for people to patch in from meetings. I once watched a faculty member, I was doing a classroom observation for him, and he was lecturing in between turns on a golf course, which not professional, um, but that's where he was holding his class. So just because we can patch in from anywhere doesn't always mean we should, I guess. And then, of course, anytime you're in a virtual conference, people are generally a little bit distracted. I know that if my doorbell rings downstairs, even though I know I'm not going to pause this and get up to go get it because this is what I'm doing, that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it, right? So my brain, I've got a little noise going on in my brain about it. Kids walk in, things like that. And also, I find it really difficult to facilitate a meeting where you keep everyone engaged. Um, I have a system with one of my coworkers where I will be giving the presentation and he will be watching the videos. He keeps a lookout for people whose eyes are darting from screen to screen, so you know they're doing something else, and then tries to kind of nudge them to get focused, things like that. Rena asks, it can it be stage fright for some? I think so. I think everybody's a little bit uncomfortable being um, on camera or recorded, that kind of thing. I know there are several schools that are super okay with, no cameras on. I am finding on a professional level that a lot of companies are now requiring them to be on, which I don't mind being in a meeting in person, right? But sometimes I don't want to see my face on camera. I feel like I have to pretend to smile. I get distracted by my own grumpy look. I'm like, why do I look so grumpy? Oh, I didn't hear what he was saying, right? So, yes, Rena, it could be a little bit of stage fright. I think so. However, I also think that virtual meetings are not going anywhere. So, we need to find a way to figure out how to cope, right? So besides something like this, like a virtual call or a video conference, we have, of course, several other options for virtual meetings. We have conference calls. This is a little bit of an old-timey concept, I think. Basically, it's this idea, but without the video piece. It's a multi-party telephone call. Okay, that was once upon a time where we'd all dial onto the line. You would, and then you'd have people, can you be on mute? Somebody's on mute, that kind of classic. Uh, we still do that. But now, since your face is attached, I can see who's off mute. I like to call them out. I'll be like, Steve Rogers, you're off of mute. Please mute Steve Rogers. Oh, I call him out. It's my favorite. So yes, conference calls used to be a thing. And yeah, so there's a lot of different technologies. One thing that I do like about using Zoom is we have things like whiteboards and polls where I could poll my audience to see, what are they thinking? What are you thinking? Which helps facilitation, right? I also have, a whiteboard tool that I can draw if I need to. Really depends on what you're going for. I also still see companies using like video television screens, like how the news will patch people in. I still see a little bit of that, But like I said, with Zoom and some of the other kind of my brain video conference tools like that, those seem to be going by the wayside. So just a couple of things for you to put in your brain as options. So the other thing that we see a lot of in the business world that is sort of taking the place of a standard meeting is something we call a collaborative technology. So basically, think about it like a wiki, okay? If those of you who don't know, Wikipedia, yes, yeah, I'm sure you've heard of the website. That is a collaborative technology because at any time, anybody can edit that document, that web page. You can add anything you want into a wiki. And we see that sort of idea being used internally in businesses as well. We have definitely workplace wikis where there will be a web page that a whole team can edit and present on. Things like, gosh, there's several project management tools, things like Red Door, or I've seen, oh shoot, kind of like a Pinterest style board for employees internally. Some PDFs are collaborative. Absolutely, Rena, you've got it. Internal social media sites. I know here at CBD we use something called Slack, which is a team communication platform. It's sort of like, it replicates external like a Facebook. It looks pretty similar to social network sites, but it's an internal thing. So I can tag my boss or my fellow faculty members. I can share photos. I can do status updates, but it's all internal and business related rather than being outward to everywhere. Google Docs. Yes, Rena, that's an excellent one. Yep. Any technology that enables kind of broad collaboration can be a collaborative technology. We see that coming together to be used in the business world to avoid meetings, right? Let's all work together on this project without being in the same space. Now, there's a few reasons for that, because when we're working together, I don't know if you folks have noticed it out there, but not every day that I show up at work am I ready to really put brain power into a project. Okay. Sometimes inspiration will hit me at like 3 a.m. and I got to get up and I need to start writing something. Sometimes somebody hates me personally and will schedule it has to be a productive meeting, but it's Friday at like 4:30 in the afternoon. Forget it. There's no creativity happening at that time. So we have things like collaborative technologies to help us optimize our time. So if I have 10 minutes or a burst of inspiration, I can go into something like a Google Doc and add my piece or write my paragraphs or brainstorm out some ideas. And everybody can see that I'm working on it and I'm doing my piece, but I'm sort of able to do it in my own time. Really interesting way to boost productivity. You would think everybody being in the same room would be the most beneficial, but we're finding that it's just not necessarily always true. Sometimes nobody's in the mood to work. People are distracted at various levels. I know that I've got a group of colleagues at work that when we get together, we just giggle and tease each other and we have the best time ever, but there's nothing getting done, right? So let's do the writing and the thinky pain part of it in a Google Doc, and then we get together and we debrief it and we go through it. So collaborative technologies are one way that we've kind of reformed the idea of company meetings. But in the event that you have to schedule a meeting, you should probably take a second to think about when the best time to do that will be. If you're like me, gosh, it's going to make a lot of difference when that meeting is held. So sometimes there are occasions when you don't get to choose whether or not you're holding a meeting. You have to hold a meeting. There's a lot of business sectors where like governing bodies demand certain amount of meetings. Things like in academics, you have to have faculty meetings every month. You have to have regular student meetings. You have to have a record of those things. So Sometimes you have to hold a meeting. Now, other times you get to choose, right? You get to choose when is the best time to bring people together, considering things like the cost, the effort, the people power it takes to stop everybody from doing what they're doing and bringing them into one room. Um, I want you to think about the purpose of the meeting before you decide to schedule it. Okay. What do you need to get accomplished? What needs to happen? Uh, if you could effectively get your outcome with a phone call, don't hold a meeting. If you're just giving information that you don't really need feedback on, you just need to send information out to people, that could be an email, doesn't have to be a meeting. Maybe you've got most of your team there, but you're missing one or two. Nothing's getting done without the whole team. Wait. Okay. Um, Sometimes you think this will be a really important meeting for all of these people, but have you really considered everybody's buy-in, right? Is it really, really important that finance is there that day? Or would they consider it to be a waste of their time? If it would be, let's reconsider this meeting. Um, One of the things that is a pet peeve of mine is when we get together to solve a really big problem and somebody only puts a half an hour on the schedule. Well, that's not enough time for us to handle everything that needs to be done. So we're going to end up setting a second meeting. Let's wait and do it right the first time. Okay. Um, what about if people are not prepared to be there? So I used to have a boss and he would schedule meetings 10 minutes from the current time. Drove me nuts. He'd be like, oh, we're going to meet in 10 minutes and we're going to talk about this. Well, sometimes you need to refresh your brain on that issue or that project or get status updates from people on your team. And 10 minutes isn't enough time. So you might be a little unprepared. And guess what? That's not going to be an effective meeting. Um, if one person could take on the job or the decision or the project, why would you have a meeting? Let the one person do it. And I hate these types of meetings as well when the person in charge of the project or the decision or whatever has already decided what they want to do about it and the meeting is just kind of obligatory. Don't hold the meeting, just do what you're going to do. Rena says, important to know everyone is hearing what's being presented. This gives everyone the opportunity to voice their opinion on the meeting points, either at the meeting or following the meeting. Absolutely. So Rena makes a really good point. You want people in the room whose voices need to be heard on the subject. If we're talking about, hey, let's redo the time off policy, it would be really important to have somebody there representing every department that's going to be impacted. So the finance people, the people, the leadership for the employees, like their union leader or their lead faculty or their head nurse or whoever who does the scheduling, the boss. If you can bring in a party from everybody that will be impacted by the decision, so all of the thoughts can be heard, that's an effective meeting, right? So when are we going to hold a meeting? When you can't make a decision on your own, or you shouldn't, when you're going to make a decision that's going to ripple out to more than one department, so it's interdependent, when there might be a lot of decisions or solutions that are options, but you really need to pick a good one and run with it. You don't have time maybe to pick, let's do this for a minute and see if that works. No, that didn't go well. Let's do this for a minute. Well, get the whole team together and figure that out ahead of time, right? Anytime a misunderstanding or it's a hot button issue, things like a time off policy or a change of structure or anything that's going to kind of ruffle the feathers of the employees, probably a good time to hold a meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page, right? Now, every good meeting is going to hopefully have an agenda. Yes. Oh, Rena, you helped me transition. So good. Rena says weekly meetings help keep all employees on track. Absolutely. I think it's really important for everybody to have a clear idea, right, of the purpose or the goal of what that week should look like, or what the goals are for the company, or just what we're doing this week. Okay. And weekly meetings are a great way to do that. Another really good way to do that is to give everyone an agenda. So those of you who have not been just enamored with company meetings, an agenda is kind of like the outline to the meeting. It gives you an idea of all the major points or the topics that are about to be covered. And if you have a meeting without an agenda, basically nobody knows what we're talking about, how long we're going to be here, how are we, going to optimize our time. So if it's your meeting, I encourage you to set an agenda, to send it out with your meeting invitation. And I want you to think, what's the goal of this meeting? What do we need to achieve here? And what kind of conversations or discussions are we going to have or need to have? And what information will people need in order to work on this problem? You start there. You start brainstorming those topics, and then your agenda sort of follows pretty naturally. I encourage you to include things like the time zone, okay? Especially, obviously, a virtual meeting. I know technology is helpful. If somebody from maybe the West Coast were to send me an Outlook meeting invite, it would update to my particular time zone, but not every technology has that capability. So when you set a meeting, if you're going to have people attending virtually, make sure that you include the time zone. It's going to be 1 Pacific, 2 Mountain, 3 Central, and 4 Eastern. Everybody on track? Everybody's on track. Make sure, especially virtually, you have instructions for access to the meeting, phone numbers you can call in, a link to click in order to get there. And I always try to build in 5-7 minutes at the top of the meeting to help people troubleshoot. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? How do I unmute? I don't see any video. Am I supposed to be seeing something? Okay. If you build in a little extra time for things like that, then you won't feel so pressed when you finally get into the business of the meeting. And you feel like you've run short of time because you spent too much time troubleshooting. So build that in right up front. I always put on my agendas and my meeting invites how long I expect the meeting to last. Okay, an hour, 90 minutes. Because if you don't, you're going to find that people will leave early. It's like, oh, I didn't realize it was this long. Oh, I have to hop off and get to another meeting. I didn't realize. So by giving the time commitment, you're setting the expectation for people who will be in the room. Okay. Keep your group sizes small, especially when you're working on high level, big picture things, right? If you are brainstorming, like, how are we going to fix a problem? And you have 30 to 40 people in the room, they all think they have the best idea. And I promise you, you're not going to get as far as you want to. This goes back to deciding who needs to be in the room. One person from the budget team, one person from, the employees to represent their interests, things like that. And then your tiny team can brainstorm with all those different perspectives. The other problem with having a big group is that you get something called groupthink. Groupthink is the idea that if enough people agree on something, other people will just kind of go along with it. So if you have 35 people on the call and 1 or 2 are really, really vocal and have good ideas, the other 30 are probably going to say, yeah, I agree with him. It's fine. They probably weren't paying attention anyway. And now they're just, whatever he says, I think that's good. Okay, so keeping it small keeps everybody accountable. I always like to try to include a little background information in the agenda as well as at the top of the meeting. So just to remind people, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here's the goal for today. Um, this was the big issue that was brought up, things like that. I like to include that right on the agenda so people are up to speed before they get there. And then I have to do less work catching them up. Okay. Now, one of the things that your textbook talks about that I think is very valuable, so I want to hit on it here, is when you're constructing an agenda for a meeting or an outline, instead of just saying the topic, like discuss policy, okay, make the topics that you write down for discussion kind of goal oriented, like redevelop the time off policy, okay? So that way, I mean, think about the verb that I've used there. Discuss the policy, so we're going to talk about it, right? Redevelop the policy, well, now we're going to be doing some work on it. We're going to be changing it. We're going to be updating it, okay? So choose really good language and words and goals right there on the agenda, so everybody has a good, clear idea of what to expect when they walk in that room. This picture comes straight out of your textbook. This is the idea of the agenda structure. Okay, it's just an agenda bell curve. What I love about this image is that it shows the amount of energy and the amount of time that should sort of be allotted to everything. And it's always important to have somebody in charge who can help keep this image in mind. So normally you start your meeting by reviewing the minutes, going over the agenda, doing any sort of announcements. That's usually how I'll start these lectures, things like that. And then you start with easy decisions, basic ideas. Then when everybody's honed in, right there in the middle, set the most time for your difficult stuff, okay? Get the easy decisions out of the way first, and then start to tackle those difficult items, brainstorm them, and then even save some of those basic things for the end, just to end on a high note. Those difficult items in the middle, the ones that are allotted 5 and 6 minutes, right? Or a fifth or a sixth of your agenda, depending on how you want to read the chart. Not necessarily resolved at this point, right? If we're brainstorming, we may push that to the next agenda where those difficult items from it will become modest decision items, right? And that's how we keep business going forward. So this is sort of a broad idea of what you would think your basic meeting would look like. Pretty standard. Okay.
Is this something in our book?
Sure is.
Oh, good. I like it. I like
Isn't
that.
it helpful? I like that bell curve too. It's really helpful to think about how to structure. I like it. All right, so let's talk about the pre-meeting work. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I loathe getting called into last-minute meetings. I hate it so much because I always walk in feeling like I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. Why do you need me? What should I have on tap for this? I like to be prepared. Okay. And there's a little bit of course, work that's going to go into appearing and being prepared. If you have employees, or if you are this type of employee that likes to be really focused and productive, maybe a little bit of a type A personality, I like to review this concept with those types of employees. Not everybody realizes that pre-meeting work is a thing. They see a meeting on their calendar, they show up, various levels of success. But if you get your employees and your coworkers in the habit of being like an hour ahead of the meeting, you're going to, first of all, appear to be the best employee ever. And you're going to have more productive meetings, which is kind of the goal. So when you are looking at your calendar and you see meetings coming up, start thinking about the pre-meeting work, okay? How can you make this hour of your time focused and productive? Now, if you have a good meeting setter, you already have an agenda. So You should know what's going to be coming your way, right? It allows you to do your homework. So if we are going to meet up and I can see that my budget review is going to be discussed, I'm going to jump into my budget. I'm going to make sure I understand where my money is, where the pain points are, and I'm going to be ready to talk about all of them. Okay. So an in-person meeting has a little more, what's the word I want? It's a little higher stake because you have less opportunity to kind of fake it. I find that in virtual meetings, if I were to say, so Rena, what do you think about this idea? And then it goes quiet. And then Rena comes off mute and says, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. I was having a connection issue. What did you just ask? Which really probably means Rena wasn't listening to the question at the time and she's sort of covering, right? It's the problem with virtual meetings. So keeping everybody focused in a virtual meeting is work. I want you to have a plan for those types of things, okay? Make sure you know how to toggle everybody's mute on and off, okay? I cannot stand stopping the flow of a really good meeting because somebody's off mute and we have to handle it. So if you are going to run a meeting, know how to mute the people in the meeting. Use the chat function, okay? Make sure that everybody in the meeting knows how to find the chat and how to respond privately and publicly to questions that you post in there, okay? Make sure that when possible, you have someone monitoring the chat that is separate from the person speaking. Like I mentioned, I have a colleague that I partner with for meetings. He watches people's attention. And he also will pause and he'll say, hey, we had a great question in the chat come up. Erin, do you want to handle this one? Which allows me to engage with people as the ideas come up, right? Make sure you know how to use the technology. Things like if I wanted to give Rena control of the PowerPoint or the meeting, do I know how to do that? Or are we going to stop everything while I look like a dork and go, I don't know how to use this technology? And the momentum is lost and credibility is a little bit shot, right? That's your pre-meeting work when you are hosting a virtual meeting. And attending, I would say the same thing. Know how to use most of these tools as well. In person, same idea. Make sure everybody has an agenda. If you're hosting the in-person meeting, make sure you have good questions ready to stimulate conversation. Make sure you have extra copies of that agenda so that you can give them to people and keep them on task. I think there's a little bit of in-person, or excuse me, pre-meeting work to be done, whether attending or hosting any meeting in any setting. So,
Dr. Walton,
go
I
ahead.
just had an experience with my friend, a very good friend of mine. She was having a job interview and she'd never been on Zoom before. And so we did just a dry run through, set it all up and did it so that she could understand everything you're saying, how to mute, just everything. So she wouldn't be doing it for the first time. Or even if you've been on Zoom before, I think like if you have a job interview, it just there's that added pressure. So I guess my point is, if it's an important meeting and you're not sure that you know everything about the technology, it's good to try it out.
Oh, that is such a good piece of advice, Rena. Anybody listening to the recording, absolutely. Job interviews particularly are high pressure anyway, right? You don't need the pressure on top of it of dealing with an unfamiliar technology. I once had a guy I was interviewing and he couldn't connect with his phone. So he tried to do the whole interview in the chat box. It was a nightmare. It makes you look less informed than you want to be. Okay, even if you go into it and say, I'm super sorry, I've never used Zoom before. It can really make or break how you're perceived by your interviewer. That's a really good piece of advice, Rena. Thank you so much for sharing it. Okay, let's talk about facilitating meetings, conducting them. Maybe if I can get my slide to go. There it is. Okay, conducting the meeting. If you're in charge of the meeting, you are the bellwether. You are the tone setter. You are the one. Everybody's looking at you. I know, high pressure, right? And it's up to you whether or not you're doing all the talking or not to set the tone for the meeting. Okay. So right off the bat, open effectively, welcome people. I like to come in with a really positive tone. If you've ever been to a meeting where, I don't know, somebody walks in, they slam down a cup, they're like, all right, let's do this. Let's get it over with. Well, that meeting's going to be fun. Walk in, seriously, take 10 minutes before you go into this meeting, get your head in the right spot, and then walk in and set the tone. We are going to have a good meeting. This is going to be effective. We're going to get stuff done. It's going to be great. Okay. So it's important for you when you're conducting to set that tone as a comfortable, professional, and creative environment. You want to have good, positive conversations. You don't want to be the boss that shuts down everybody's ideas that are different than yours. That is all you as the leader of the meeting. It's important for you, both online and in person, especially online, to discuss the etiquette, especially if you're going to be talking about something maybe that's a little high pressure or delicate. Okay. Set the rules right up front. So sometimes if you're in a virtual meeting, you can say things like, I'm going to put everybody on mute. If you have a question, use the hand raise function and I will take you off mute. Not everybody's allowed to mute and unmute themselves, but you set the rule right up front. Okay. You just, you then have to follow that rule and make sure you're calling on people whose hands are raised, right? In an in-person meeting, I'm going to tell you this problem and then I'd like to open it for discussion, but please let me get through the whole thing before we start having conversations about it. Okay. So set the etiquette. It doesn't have to be mean. You're not a prison guard. You're not telling people this is how you will behave, but let them know what your expectations are. One of the things that I always ask, and I've mentioned it before, is multitasking. When I'm in a virtual meeting, I know multitasking is going to happen. I, right up front, will say, guys, I want your cameras on so I can see what you're doing. If it appears that your head is not all here, I'm going to call you out on it. Okay, so be prepared that if I catch you multitasking, you're going to get put on the spot. And I call it right up front. Okay. But then, of course, always have a meeting that has a sense of goodwill to it, right? Hey, this might be a hard meeting to have. I want you to know that no matter what happens at the end of this meeting, I still respect you as a colleague. Let's have this hard conversation. Let's hash this thing out. All of that goes towards setting a tone of goodwill and of productivity. Rena says, important to know they'll have a chance to ask questions. Absolutely, that's very important. If we're going to get into like some policy, I'm going to change the time off policy. Before you guys all yell at me, I want you to know why and how and my first plan, and then I want your feedback, and I will let you tell me everything you want me to hear about it, okay? And then they just kind of got to sit and wait, but make sure you give them the floor, right? Follow through. All right, so some tools for creating goodwill. Of course, once you've established your etiquette, you can talk a little bit about the goodwill. One really, really easy way to establish goodwill is roll call, introductions. Hi, I'm Dr. Walton. I teach communications and English. I'm the program director over here. I do that over there. And my expertise is in XYZ, okay? This is Peter Quill. This is Tony Stark. now we all very basically know each other and we know why we're all in this room. Okay. The other thing you can do to set goodwill, and this one may sound a little bit silly, but it's been helpful for me in the past, is to have a backup plan. Okay. Because technology stinks and it will go out on you when you are not ready. So I like to have a backup plan. I like to send out in the email with the agenda things like, if for any reason Zoom isn't working, here is the call-in number. We'll just do it by phone. Okay. That way everybody knows the plan ahead of time. So that helps people know that, you know, this meeting's going to happen. We're going to get some things done. I need you all to be there. It's that important that I have a backup plan. Same with like a slideshow. Okay. I need to be able to give my slides, or my presentation, I should say, even without my slides. My slides should be extra, just kind of a cherry on top. Backup plan in the agenda. Yep, that's a go-to. I very rarely have had to use it, Rena, but it has saved me on occasion. Okay. So let's talk kind of nuts and bolts of meetings. Okay. Parliamentary procedures. I don't want to get too far into this because this is a little bit specific. There are some rules and traditions when it comes to holding meetings. One of them is called parliamentary procedure. That's probably what you think about when you think of court, right? Parliament, structure. This happens, then that happens, then this happens. So meetings that are run parliamentary style follow a very specific agenda. First, we read the minutes, and then usually we vote to accept or amend. Okay. Minutes are similar to an agenda. Usually there's someone taking notes, and it's like when I do, let's review real quick what we did last week before we move forward. That's kind of reading of the minutes. Okay. It kind of brings everyone up to speed. Then we do reports. If you're working on projects, you'll give every team a chance to report on their project, to give us updates on specific tasks, things like that. Sharing information kind of goes there, right? So that's reports. Then we have unfinished business, old matters from the last meeting that haven't been handled, or if we have any ongoing projects that, you know, have to be discussed. That'll be the unfinished business. And then we do new business, usually opening up the floor for any new items or new pieces of conversation that need to happen. And sometimes new business sort of goes on, I'll say, which then gets pushed to the next agenda under old business. All right. So one of the things that I kind of love about parliamentary procedure, it feels very fancy. Maybe I'm just a nerd about it, but when you are doing business, when you're in the unfinished business or the new business portion, people like to make motions. Things like, I move to accept the new proposal. And then the motion must be seconded, and then it will be passed, right? That happens in the business sections. I love that part. It makes me feel very fancy. Not everybody does it, but it's one of the rules of parliamentary procedure, so I wanted to cover it here. Now, parliamentary procedure is a really, really good way to start running meetings. It gives you structure. It lets you know what needs to be happening. But really, it's my opinion, and again, my opinion, that once you have kind of a flow for your people, for what needs to accomplish for the people that are on your team, parliamentary procedure can be really confining. So use it to get started and then let the meeting kind of do its thing. I just realized how far I have gone, and I have not. We're going to have to sort of zoom through the last little bit. So I'm going to go a little fast. My apologies in advance. I was not watching my time very well this time. So, all right. So when you're making a decision, couple of methods you can use. There's a couple of categories decisions fall into. You can have what you call a consensus decision. This is when everybody in the room has to agree. So it's got to be kind of a unanimous decision. That's called reaching a consensus. Okay. You can have a majority vote. That's where most of the people in the room have to agree. You can have a minority decision. This is a few people making a decision which affects a whole group. We see that a lot in business. In the example I was discussing earlier, someone from budget has to be there, someone from finance or from employee relations has to be there. That's called a minority decision, because the budget guy is going to make the decision and then he's going to take that back to his budget team and he's going to have to implement it and tell them what happened. Okay. So long as the people in the minority decision team have the confidence of everybody, it's a helpful way to make decisions. And then of course, expert opinion, when one person who has the most information, has the most training or expertise about a subject, when they make the call and everybody has to kind of follow suit because, they're the expert, right? Now, when you're making a decision, there's definitely a flow to it. If we have a problem, most people will attack it first with a brainstorm, right? So let's imagine we've got employees that are dissatisfied with the time off policy. Well, let's talk about how we can attack that problem. Well, let's brainstorm. Perfect. Brainstorming is one of the best ways I've ever seen to get creative in meetings. Okay. You let members bring their perspectives to the task. Brainstorming is my favorite part because anything goes. Okay. There are 3 cardinal rules when you're brainstorming. Number 1, suspend criticism, replace it with curiosity. So suspend your judgment. If somebody says, why don't we give everyone time off all day, every day? Okay, put it on the board, right? We don't criticize, we don't judge, and we don't shoot down ideas in the brainstorm rule. Put them all up on the board, okay? Quantity, not quality, is the goal. Throw everything out there, everything. Don't think about the statistics. Don't think about how are we going to implement that. Nope, you've got an idea. Got 10 ideas, put them on the board. This allows you to seek new combinations of ideas, especially when you're working with the minority decision makers. You're going to see different levels of expertise bringing in different pieces, and you can say, well, I like Wonder Woman's idea. I wonder if we could make that work with Supergirl's idea. How could those 2 things go together? Be open to those combinations, okay? Couple of tips and tricks for brainstorming. Never let the boss speak first. They set that tone, but if they go first, people will just sort of follow suit and lean into whatever they see. Don't follow a speaking order. Don't go, hey, we'll go around the room one at a time. Nope, that's too much pressure. When you have an idea, let it out, okay? And then I always encourage, when you can, to let everybody have a voice, not just the bosses, right? 1 or 2 lower level employees can really bring some new ideas to the table. So extend the option for them to do that. And when you are doing a brainstorming session and any meeting, really, you need to make sure there's participation happening. You need to have some questions ready. Okay. This is part of your pre-meeting work when you are running the meeting. So think about things like overhead questions. These are big picture questions that anybody can answer. People seem to be upset with the time off policy. Anybody know why? Okay. There are absolutely direct questions. Rena, what are you hearing about our time off policy? Okay. That's a good direct question. What about like reverse questions? If Rena were to say, like she did earlier, what about stage fright? And I can say, oh, that is a good idea. Rena has a great question. What do you guys think about stage fright? That's called a reverse question, where I take Rena's great question. I don't answer it as the boss because I don't want to set that tone. I send it back out to all the members of the team to think about. Okay. That can be that can go really easily into a relay question. Same idea. Rena has a really good question. Who's got an answer? Instead of a what do you think, it's a who can answer it. It's like pairing reverse and direct questioning together. Okay, so have a couple of those ready to go to stimulate participation in your meeting and your brainstorming session. And then, of course, as the boss, you've got to keep everybody on track. Sometimes the problem is not that nobody's talking, it's that everyone's talking and there's a lot of good ideas. So it's important for you to acknowledge everybody's comments, but remind them that we are on a timeline, okay? When people start to get off track, I like, they call them in the textbook a relevancy challenge, which is a delightfully useful tool when you're running a meeting. When you say, Rena, that's a great comment you made about your experience this weekend, but can you help me understand how it relates to the time off policy that we're discussing, right? If I challenge that random comment you made to bring us back, that's called a relevancy challenge, keeps everybody going forward. And always promise and always follow through with keeping dealing with the good ideas later. So when you are running your brainstorming session, you might get like 10 really good ideas. You might narrow it down to the one that makes sense, but that doesn't mean the other 9 are not valuable. So if you see something you can use elsewhere or use later, promise to follow through with it. Don't break that promise, okay? Be a good boss. Now, we talked a little bit about keeping a positive tone. That's your job as well as the leader of the meeting, especially when they get heated. Make sure you are always clarifying the understanding and asking questions. So especially when there's criticisms going on. So it sounds like you're not a huge fan of this idea. Can you help me understand why it's bothering you so much? Okay. If you ask questions, you clarify understanding, you paraphrase back, you'll find that maybe it's not that this employee didn't like the time off policy, he didn't like one piece of it. Well, you can tweak that, right? Enhance members' comments and always acknowledge their merits, okay? Oh, that was a really great idea. Thank you, Tom, for that wonderful idea. I don't know that it will work here, but please send me an email about it. I have a good place for that. Or, Tom, that's a really, really great idea. I'm a little bit concerned that it's not going to work for this particular situation. Does anybody have any ideas on how we could make this work? Right? So always acknowledge and enhance your team. Explain any concerns as you have them. It's pretty common to get what I call the meeting after the meeting, where everybody's dismissed and then they go, did you hear Tom's bonehead idea? That was crazy. Well, maybe instead of that, we say, Tom, I'm concerned with your idea for these reasons. Can you help me? And Tom might go, yeah, you're right. That was not a good idea. And then, right, we've diffused it. Always ask for suggestions. And this one is one that's often left off the table. Pay attention to cultural factors. Your textbook outlines it beautifully. In Japan, problem-solving meetings are always preceded by one-to-one sessions so that you can iron out issues and brainstorm one-on-one, and then everybody comes together, okay? Now, that's an Eastern culture. We are a Western culture, so that's not necessarily how we run things here. But if you have someone on your team that is not from your country of origin, they may struggle to participate in how we do things. Pay attention to that. It doesn't mean they're not interested or eager to help. It might be a cultural factor, okay? When time is up, when it's time to conclude, give everybody a warning. I like to give a 10-minute, okay? Hey guys, we're heading into the last 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Anybody have any final thoughts? Okay. Then, of course, summarize the top level things you did. All right, so we know what we're going to do about the time off policy. And we have a new idea how to handle this other thing. and then handle next steps. So I'm going to send Rena back, and she's going to draft up this policy document. And I'm going to send Tom to talk to his team about, these 5 things. And then we're going to reconvene in a week and follow up. Okay. And then, of course, always thank the group. It's just good manners, but it also lets your team know you appreciate them. After you are done, make sure day of your meeting minutes are distributed. Once you leave that room, there's something about walking through a doorway, it clears your brain, right? So if you then email out the minutes, people are like, oh yeah, I did say I would do that. Okay, I'll go get that done. Use the minutes that you're sending out to build your next agenda. Remember, we're taking the new business from this meeting, and that will become old business for next meeting. Make sure it gets on the next agenda. Make sure you follow up on the plans. Hey, Rena, how are you doing on your piece? Are you going to be ready for next week? Just checking on you. And then, of course, if I have any action items, I need to make sure those are done too. Now, I do have a hilarious video, but we do not have a ton of time. Rena, do you want to watch my hilarious video? I have to share the sound.
Of course. However it works for you for putting it on your.
Okay, I'm going to share it with my sound. Let me share my sound so that you guys can hear it. I don't know why it makes me laugh so hard, but it does. So I'm going to share it with you.
Hey, I was on this date the other night, and we were at this
Oh, no.
restaurant.
All right, guys, you guys ready to get started?
Hang on a second. And
Trip, you ready to get started, buddy?
Okay. Hey, you guys, we're all here. We should start.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some ideas for the marketing strategy this year. So if you got one, just throw it out there. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, how long is this meeting supposed to last? The schedule wasn't exactly clear.
Should be out of here in 30.
Is that approximate or?
Hey, guys. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I got caught in traffic.
7 minutes, actually.
What's that?
Couple is 2.
So what we're doing is we're just coming up with some ideas for our new marketing strategy.
Sure.
So, anyone?
I think we should implement Pinterest.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
What about a publicity event in the park?
Interesting. But how are you going to plan around the weather? What if it rains?
So we'll party in the rain.
Okay, just want to emphasize there's no bad ideas here. We're just brainstorming. So.
Yeah, I'm just really thinking it'll be a huge waste of money to try to plan around the weather.
Yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Nancy, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have an idea? Ephraim?
I've always wanted to see rain fall down all at once in a big splash instead of small drops over time. I mean, think how it could impact the irrigation system.
Okay. Terry?
Well, I have an idea from my previous job that I had last year, but let me take that back a little bit. I have this wonderful idea, but it doesn't really make sense unless I just take it back a second and bring it forward together. It was like 3 weeks ago that I remember he said something that I couldn't understand.
Hold on a second, Terry. Hold on. Thanks for pointing. Here's what we need to do, okay? Lauren, you got this? We do a video submission contest on YouTube.
Oh, that's been done.
It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Pinterest, it'll be on Twitter.
If we do something with technology, we lose the senior demographic.
So, you guys want to see an example?
Should we be moving on to the next topic? I mean, it's already 1:15.
Quarter after. That's funny.
Who knows how to put this on the screen? Up there, because you're not gonna be able to, I want you to see all the details. We have a cable, does this cable work?
I think that's power.
I don't know if on the there's an
This one.
HDMI
That
port,
cord's not going to be long
in
enough.
the back.
Does that
there
remote
could be
go to
like
the
2 or 3,
TV?
like HDMI 1.
Plenty of time,
HDMI
guys.
2,
No rush.
HDMI
This isn't
3,
working.
I got a
and
green
then they
marker.
coincide
Call the
with
IT
each
guy.
other with,
Wait,
there's
turn
also,
what off and back
what
on?
do you call it? S-video.
Hello?
Okay, I've got it working.
Hit play. Okay, now imagine hundreds of those floating around the web. Do you want to watch it one more time?
No, please.
Trip, I think you're onto something with this idea. I really like it. Carol, did you get that down?
Yep, got it.
Sorry, what is C-test up sub YT pros?
Well, I'm abbreviating to make room for all these great ideas. Contest, uploading it to YouTube, funniest, and you get a prize.
Wait, where are the other ideas?
And time.
Wait, where y'all going? We still have 100% of the things to accomplish.
That's my favorite line. We still have 100% of the things to accomplish. And that literally is every meeting ever. I will tell you, I am occasionally the leader, sometimes the dominator. I am a terrible note taker. So let's recap really quickly the main points. Remember, meetings are common. They are time consuming. They are costly. That's why you need to consider when to effectively hold them. When is it a good idea? When is it not? Keep in mind the purpose of your meeting and what you want to get accomplished. Make sure as the meeting leader, you set the tone. You establish etiquette. Make sure you extend goodwill. Remember, replace criticism with curiosity. Keep in mind the benefits of a virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting, benefits and drawbacks, I should say. Always have an agenda, and don't forget the decision-making styles, the consensus, the majority, the minority, and the expert opinion. Okay, we made it. Rena, any questions or anything that you think the class could benefit from before I stop the recording?
No, I enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot going on in that. It was good.
Did it ring true for you?
It did. It brought back, flashbacks of different meetings I've been in and things like that. So I learned a few things that are new. So I like that.
Excellent. Okay. Well, those of you not live listening to the recording, feel free to holler at me if you have any questions, comments, and concerns. And as always, I will see you folks next week.